Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing the support tier list. As always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Be sure to check out the rest of the content as well. We stream every night, usually starting around 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, going until about 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, going until 2 or 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we stream for a few hours. So come by and check that out if you're interested. And I'm going to try to see if I can get an ADC tier list up over the next couple of days. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So there were some changes aimed at support that came in this patch. They, nerfed enchanters to some extent, mostly Moonstone, but I think a lot of enchanters have just adjusted the items that they get, primarily moving from Moonstone over to Shirelias, and a lot of them already had a really good win rate with Shirelias anyways. So the overall tier list I don't think has changed that much. There's a couple of standouts. Tarek's a little bit higher. We'll talk about that. But there are some new builds, I think, that are interesting, specifically on Rakan. So be sure to at least stay for the first portion of the video before you head out if you want to know the new Rakan build that I think is pretty good. And on that note, let's go ahead and get in there. So what's going on with Rakan? I always have him in S tier. There's probably a lot of people that, are not believers in Rakan. But over the last week or so, I've been trying this build out, and I've been doing really well, right? So 74% on Rakan. I had the one loss on Senna, but I've pretty much done this build solid for 19 games in a row, and we've done really well with it. So it's basically going into Night Harvester first, the vast majority of the time, and then after that, you have your same sort of options of things that you can get, but I have been sort of shifting more towards AP items, so things like the Putrefier, if you need that in some games. Banshee's Veil is another one I'll talk about that I think is really good on Rakan and very underrated, price-wise. And then if I'm snowballing, I'll even get Sork Boots in some matchups. As you can see, a lot of the times I do Ionians, but if I'm doing really well, or my ADC is doing really well, then sometimes I'll get Sork Boots just for that extra little spike of damage in that early to mid game to help close out some deals. Okay, so let's talk about why I'm going Night Harvester instead of some other items. And I have done this in the past. This was basically when Night Harvester came out. It used to proc for a lot more damage. It was somewhere between like 150 and 250 damage on release. So it was really high, scaling based on level. But they've nerfed it down to always be 125 at every level, but they've given it more stats to compensate for that. So I think they've given it 10 or 20 more AP over time. They've given it 10 more ability haste over time. They've given it, I think, 50 or 100 more HP over time. So they keep giving it more stats. And that's where I think it really shines, is not necessarily even and they changed the build path too. They moved it away from Blasting Wand into Fiendish Codex, which is about 1,000,000 times better. A couple of patches ago they changed that. So if you look at the raw stats on this item, it's 107% efficient. So basically, before you take the mythic passive into account, you're paying 3,200 gold and you're getting a little over 3,400 gold value. Versus if you look at Shirelias, which is the most common item on Rakan, typically, if you look at just the raw stats on it, you're basically you're paying 2,500 on paper for about 2,400 gold worth of stats. But if you look at how much mana regen you're getting, you're paying 500 gold for mana regen. And the thing about mana regen with Rakan is it's okay in the laning phase so that you can get more trades, throw more Qs, go in with W, E back out, all that stuff. But outside of the laning phase, you really don't need it because at your core, you're an all-in champion, right? You're a lot closer to something like a Leona or a Nautilus or an Alistar than you are to something like a Lux, right? Because you really don't have any poke, honestly. Like, yeah, you can hit them with a Q later on, but most of the time you're only getting 1 point in Q, and so it's just going to tickle them. Outside the laning phase, it's not going to do anything other than give you some Spell Thieves procs. It does give you a heal, which is nice. But the main point is, like, you don't need the mana regen because you're not spamming abilities. And really, as a support, like, you're not usually using a lot of mana to wave clear, and you have to go back to base very often to replace your wards anyways. So, you don't need the mana regen, right? And unless you are a champion that constantly spams abilities like maybe a Lux or a Xerath or Vel'Koz, those types of champs, then yes, mana regen can be good because you're trying to poke the enemy. But when you're just an all-in champ and you're going back to base all the time anyways and getting a full mana bar, after every fight, or at least every, minute and a half, 2 minutes to replace your wards, then you just don't need it. It's a dead stat. It doesn't do anything in a team fight for you. So if you look at that number, then if bust out the calculator, I guess I could just do it on the computer. But now if we're looking at 1946 versus of like real stats, like real power that you get in fights divided by 2500, then all of a sudden it's only 77% efficient. So basically, when you buy Night Harvester, you're gaining 200 gold. When you buy Mandate, you're losing 600 gold. About. And the build path is just not... It's not as good for like really applying pressure to the lane either. Because if we look at Night Harvester, everything builds out of Amp Tomes. So whenever you back, you can always just buy Amp Tomes, right? You buy 2 Amp Tomes if you want. If you have enough for the alternator, you can buy that. This does a lot of damage, by the way. It'll definitely catch people off guard early on. That proc damage that, usually about 60 or 70 when you buy this, is based on level, can really catch people off. I mean, that's basically like adding an extra, 50 damage to your W, effectively, which is obviously a lot. So that's a really, really powerful, underrated item. But the Amplifying Tomes, too, just give you really great pressure. You don't have to stop and get something like a Fairy Charm, right? You don't have to get a Kindle Gem. Yes, there is 1 Ruby Crystal in there. So 400 gold is not going to help you snowball. But everything else adds damage, adds to your all-in threat, so that you can actually kill people at level 6, like most all-in champions. You can kill them, at level 6, and then snowball your advantage, get dragons, roam, all of that stuff. It just really unlocks your lane in many ways that Shurelya's just doesn't, right? Because you only have 1 Amp Tome in this build, and then you've got like a Fairy Charm, you got Bandle Glass, which is, no extra AP, you've got Kindle Gem, which, no extra AP, so it really makes it a lot harder to convert those kills early on. And the thing about AP on Rakan is he scales really well with it, and it helps your defense too. So it helps the utility on your team. And I think that's something that a lot of people underestimate, is that your shield has a really, really good AP ratio. I don't know if it says it here. Yeah, a 0.7. So when your shield is maxed kind of in the mid game, it's basically a 300 shield because you can cast it twice with a 1.4 AP ratio. That is a lot. So when you start getting AP on Rakan, you'll notice your shields are huge when you put them on people, so it really saves people. And I would say that it depends on the item, but it's pretty close to plus healing and shielding as a stat, but it's a lot cheaper, AP is, to plus healing and shielding, and it's a lot easier to get with a lot of builds where you don't really have to go out of your way as much with your items to get it. So it's really, really good. It also, converts over to effective HP for you in a fight because your passive, I don't think it has it listed here, but your passive has like a 0.7 or something AP on your shield. So that means if you have 100 AP, it's, basically giving you 70 extra HP because they're going to have to break through that shield before they get to you. So even in an all-in situation where you're only going to get this shield once, it's still basically health on that shield. It's a 0.85. Okay, so it's even more. So if, you have 100 AP, it's giving you 85 extra HP effectively. So it's really, really good. AP is. And then, of course, it does more damage, right? Like, you have a 0.7 AP on your W, and then your R is kind of wimpy. It's only a 0.5, but you got to remember, there's a really high probability you're going to hit multiple people with this. Like, it's kind of hard to miss in a team fight, not hitting, like, 2 or 3 people. because you have so much time to do it. So there's a lot of reliability that goes into that. So the AP has always been really good on Rakan. It's just a question of, is it worth giving up the utility of other items to get the AP? Now, if you're a pro player, obviously the active on Shirelia's is really, really good, right? It just boosts your whole team in there to go fight and go kill them. But this day and age, like, there are so many champions that also have dashes, that also have ways to run people down and kill them. And there's so many ways you can miscoordinate this. Like, you can use the Shirelles to try to run in yourself and your teammate just doesn't go. Or maybe you made a bad decision and you're trying to run in and you just get yourself killed. So it is a really nice active, but it has been nerfed a lot over time. Remember, it used to be 60% movement speed. Now it's 30%. And empowering and protecting other champions at the 25% movement speed, like, that's good too. It's definitely good. But I just think that it's harder to really get a lot of value out of that consistently. Like, again, you get it with Night Harvester, and yes, this is good in team fights. The Shirelia's is really good in team fights, but with Night Harvester, you're getting 30 or 45% more efficiency on your buy, which just in terms of the raw stats is good. You're also getting this proc damage, which can convert kills too. Now, it's not a massive amount of damage, but you got to remember that it's on an individual cooldown, right? So in a team fight, if you hit 3 or 4 people with this, let's just say you hit 3 people with this, it's 375 proc damage effectively every 30 seconds. So it's definitely up, every single fight. And in the laning phase, you're not going to complete this until after the laning phase typically, but you can do it every wave too. So it's a pretty low cooldown. And that damage does add up. It definitely converts to kills. But you got to keep tempo in mind too. That's something that I think a lot of people also really underestimate. Like, being able to snowball, asserting your dominance in the laning phase, and converting that into dragons, into roams, into towers, plates, things like that, that has a lot of value. So yes, Shirelia's in a team fight, open field where it allows you to catch somebody out and make plays, that is very good. But your laning phase is going to be trash if you go Shirelia's, and that's what a lot of people think of Rakan as, like, having a really bad laning phase. This fixes a lot of that because you actually can kill people. You do, once you start building AP, especially once you get that alternator, like, your all-in is just as scary, if not more scary than Leona or Nautilus, right? If you get somebody with that W, they're probably going to die because you're doing a lot of damage when you start building AP with them. And you're providing really big shields, so it's hard for them to turn it and kill your ADC whenever you go all in. So it's the gold efficiency and the tempo of this item that's good. And especially in lower elo brackets, gold, it seemed to work really well. Platinum probably still works, and definitely in silver and bronze. It should be solid for a couple of reasons, right? Number one is people are just out of position more. They're not going to respect, your ability to engage on them, and they're not going to expect this damage out of Rakan either most of the time. So it's pretty easy to land W's on a lot of people in the laning phase, especially immobile ADCs, immobile supports. It's going to be pretty easy to hit them. Second, just a lot of people die in lower elos, so you're just going to have more gold. And this is just going to scale better a lot of the time as well, because you do have that little bit of ratio on there. And then once you start getting more AP and then plus healing and shielding, depending on which items you get and things like that, the AP is just going to scale extremely well as the game goes on. And I often find myself, like, yes, this is more expensive. It's like 700 gold. But usually where I find the buys when I go, like, Shirelia's is I'll get 2 items and then a half item at the end. So I'll just be sitting on a Kindle gem usually at the end of the game anyways. That's, like, good, but it's not a completed item that's going to give me a lot more power, right? So with this, usually you're just going to shave off that half item at the end. You're going to get this a little bit later, but it's going to be much more impactful while you're building to it and once you actually complete it. So basically, instead of getting, 2 smaller items and a half item at the end, you're getting 1 big item and then a smaller item as far as cost-wise goes. So I think just tempo-wise, it makes sense because you're not kind of just sitting on that not useless, but not as high impact as it's not worth giving up the early tempo to have a Kindle gem at the end. Is what I'm saying. Like, it's better to have the tempo, cost more to complete the item, give up that Kindle gem at the end in order to be able to snowball. Like, that's another argument I could say, just in terms of how much gold you typically get. And of course, if the game goes super long, it's much more slot efficient. So if you're just rolling in gold, if you have 1,000,000 gold and it's a 50-minute game, and you've got 6 items, like, this is going to be better because it's more gold dense, right? It has a lot more stats packed into one inventory slot. Now, that doesn't always come up, but again, that's another thing in some situations where it would be advantageous. Okay, so I do like that. There is not much data on it for people outside of me, as most people just don't buy that item, but it does have a 59% win rate. I don't know if that's accurate, man. Is it really, like, literally I'm the only person on the server buying this? 22 picks. I mean, I've played it this patch 19 times, so maybe it literally just is me. But it is pretty good. So you can go for the other builds on Rakan. As you can see, a lot of the other stuff's kind of fallen off. I was trying last patch. I was trying Even Shroud, and that does give, in some situations, quite a bit of extra damage to your teammates. But I've seen other games where it really just doesn't do a lot. And again, you just can't snowball with it because you just don't have a lot of damage. And defensive stats are good on Rakan, but you have a lot of mobility, so you should be able to get away from a lot of situations. And keep in mind, Harvester has 350 HP too, so that'll definitely make you a little bit thicker. And remember that the AP transfers over to health too, so when it gives you 80 AP on it, that extra 40 AP is probably translating into like at least 35 more health. So you're getting almost 200 more health than this other item. Now, does the 200 health make up for the armor and magic resist? No, but still, it's more defensive than it might seem as well. The extra ability haste, the 5 extra ability haste is definitely relevant too. But yeah, I mean, there are a few different builds you can go on it, but that's my reasoning why I've been getting that item, and I've been pretty impressed with it. Another item that I've been impressed by is Banshee's Veil on Rakan. So now, I haven't been getting this every single game, but there have been several games where I've gotten it, and I've been pleasantly surprised by this item because it's very efficient. Just like the other items, like Night Harvester, you're getting a lot of value out of this item, right? It's 108% efficient, so that means you're buying 2,800 gold worth of stats for 2,600, and that it does not include the spell shield, which is extremely valuable on Rakan, right? Because if you think about it, how do you usually die as Rakan? What's the number one way that you die if you're playing Rakan? Usually you get chain CC'd and blown up, right? Because you're so mobile most of the time, unless somebody's turbo fed, they're not going to be able to kill you unless they lock you down, right? Unless you're CC'd for like 3 seconds, it's going to be really hard to kill you. So this spell shield fixes a lot of that, and there aren't a ton of poke champions in the meta right now. You might see a Vel'Koz, you might see a Xerath, something like that, but it's pretty rare. So this helps out a lot whenever you're trying to go in and you're afraid that a Mumu might ult if you go in on him, or you're afraid that Mordekaiser might ult you whenever you try to go in. It makes it a lot harder for them to do that when you have the Banshees. You're afraid, Lux can clear this with like her E, but she's going to have to activate her E before she throws her Q. If she wants to hit you with this. So it just makes it really obnoxious for other champions to try to open on you. Nautilus can't just missile you or something like that, right? He has to hit you with a Q first and then missile you. So it helps out so much when you get this item. And having that magic resist, there are a lot of magic damage champions that are, floating around that are pretty powerful right now. So having that extra magic resist is definitely helpful. And it has 80 ability power on it. I forgot that. I thought I saw a 90 or something, but it has 80 on it. I thought it had like 60. So that's a pretty big AP item for something that's only 2,600 gold. Now, the question here is, do you really want this over something like your traditional kind of big 3 Rakan items, right? Like the Putrefier, the Zeeks, and I consider Knight's Vow a big one as well. And you can still get those items situationally. But again, a lot of this is about the snowball, right? You're trying to get ahead, you're trying to do damage so your team can convert kills and get objectives. And those items just don't have AP on them. And remember that AP also helps your shields. So, when you have 80 AP on Rakan, you're going to be, adding an extra 120 or so to your shields on your E, and then you're personally going to be getting an extra like 75 HP off of this item as well, which is an additional 200, like 180 to 200 gold value on this item because of your passive. So you just get so much out of AP, including the ability to help your team. Now you can get something like a Zeke's, right? And it's going to be okay. It's going to give you some more survivability. It has that flat mana on it. Remember, that's included in the cost. And because I think Zeke's is probably the second most popular item, right? Yes. And it does have a good win rate. But again, just look at like the cost analysis here, right? Like you're paying 350 gold. It's already only 93% efficient, right? You're paying 2,400 gold for 2,200 stats. But if you take off that, the mana, then all of a sudden you're only getting 1,900 gold worth of stats. So you're losing 500 gold off of buying this item, right? And it's like, yes, this is nice, right? The passive is nice. It does extra damage. You can snowball with that if like your ADC is playing and they're getting Hurricane or Ginsu's or something where they can really leverage that on-hit damage. It's quite good. In terms of how much damage it can do, but it's not that crazy a lot of times, and it's not burst, right? Someone has to actually auto attack quite a bit to get value out of that, versus the AP is going to help your burst when you go in on people. And again, health, armor, like it's good, but it's not entirely necessary if you weren't going to die anyways, right? So if you have good positioning, that may not happen. And with the Banshee's shield, an extra 250 health probably isn't going to save you if you get chain CC'd for 3 or 4 seconds, right? But if they can't do that chain to you, if you block the first CC and that gives you enough time to use your mobility to E and jump back out, then all of a sudden you live. And as far as like the armor goes, yes, armor is good, but you're also getting 45 magic resist on this one. So it kind of depends on what the enemy team comp is. Obviously, if they have like 3 very heavy hitting AD champions, then the armor might be a little bit better. But you can also get a Zanya's, which is pretty good as well. It's not as cost efficient, but obviously, that active is really, really good. Like Zanya's is one of the most OP items in the game. So Zanya's is another AP item that has armor on it, if you want to consider that instead of the Banshees, and they're about the same cost. But I just really like this a lot more in most situations. It feels like AP champs are much more threatening a lot of times because typically they have a lot more burst and they can kill you while you're CC'd more so than many of the AD champs that usually do more sustained damage that you can kind of dance around. So it's just something to think about. I'm not saying everybody needs to get it in every situation, but it's just something I've been trying out that I found success with, and there's just not a lot of data there. I will say if you look at Zanya's, though, that does have a high win rate, which is another AP utility type of item. Banshees, it's only got only 17 picks on it, and it's 71% win rate, but again, really low sample size. So I think there's some evidence this stuff can work anecdotally and just theoretically, but a lot of people aren't doing it. Now, Putrefire is something you might just have to get, right? Because it's the best Grievous Wound item in the game. Yes, it has been nerfed. Yes, it does have mana regen on it, which does kind of suck. But it still does have 60 AP. It still does have 20 ability haste. And 40% Grievous Wounds is just extremely valuable. And you really want to buy it yourself rather than having your ADC like try to get Executioners or something. That just kind of sucks. Now, the Kimpunk Chainsword is still pretty good, I think, even after the nerfs on this patch. So if you have a Hecarim or something that's getting that item, you're not going to need this. But also remember, you don't have to freak out and get this if they have a little bit of healing, right? Like sometimes just doing more damage or having more utility or something can be better, because if they just have like lifesteal or something, if they just die, they can't lifesteal if they're dead. So if you're doing more damage, sometimes the best defense is a good offense. So just keep that in mind. But this is another option that is really good, and you can slot that in comfortably with this build. But yeah, I've been moving away from the Knight's Vow, the Zeeks. I would definitely move away from Redemption, especially after the nerf. This item just doesn't give you a lot of great stats. Like, it's got 100% base mana regen, which again is bad on Rakan, and then it's so variable, right? Like, sometimes you're going to hit your allies with it, sometimes they run out of it. It's just really unstable. So yeah, it does have an okay win rate, but I just wouldn't mess with it. I wouldn't trust it unless you're like with a coordinated team, and even then, I'm not sure. So anyways, that's a lot on Rakan, but I've been asked about Rakan and this build a lot, so I just wanted to go ahead and throw that out there, be clear about this build, why I've had success with it. And again, just to kind of sum it up, a lot of it just comes down to tempo. This just, especially once they allowed you to get this Fiendish Codex instead of a Blasting Wand, and it builds out of Amp Tome, it just try it out, trust me. It has a very, very smooth tempo curve, right? Every time you back, it's feeling good. You're getting Amp Tomes, you're getting stronger, you're able to come back to the lane and just kill them even more. Snowball, especially now with the dragons, as strong as they are, you really want to be able to do something, pre-6, and frankly, Rakan has not been the best at that historically, but this build helps a lot. So it also helps you sustain in kind of tougher lanes if you're in poke lanes, if you have that AP, because your Q heals, but then you get bonus healing based on your AP. So that also helps your ally heal a lot more too. And you can soak more damage because your passive shield is going to be better if you have more AP. So it just helps you defensively to some extent in lane as well. It's just extremely good. AP is extremely good on Rakan. And I think with just how much tempo matters right now and changing this build path and the buffs this item has received over the last few patches, I think it's time to try it out again. So, okay, let's talk about the rest of the list here. So Renata got just a tap on this, and I'm going to move a little bit faster and then talk about the stuff that had some significant changes, like Taric, Ashe, things like that you may not have heard a lot about. And I don't want this video to be super long either. I am trying to make these closer to like that 30 to 45 minutes. But again, I wanted to talk mostly about Rakan because that's who I'm most well known for, and this is a different build that you're probably just not going to hear about in most places. Okay, so Renata, it's about the same. I think they took away 2 AD off of her or something. It was like some slap on the wrist. Yeah, they took away 2 AD. Yes, they took away 50 health, and that does matter. And, if you're playing Rakan, that's great because now you can kill her a lot more in the laning phase. But, yeah, it makes her more susceptible to all-in. There aren't a lot of all-in champs that are being played right now in solo queue. Nautilus is probably one of the better ones. You have Rakan, obviously. But as far as, other ones, Nautilus is still, pretty respectable. Leona is not getting played a lot. So, and I just don't think that base health is going to matter, as much against enchanters. Maybe it does because it's harder for you to get sustain, but you're not building a lot of sustain on Renata anyways, right? You might have a couple of potions early. But either way, she's good. That is going to make her more susceptible if it's a double poke lane, if it's, Misfortune Lux or something like that. Yeah, it's going to be a little tougher. But I think she's still going to be solid. I mean, she just has so much utility, right? She's kind of like the New Age Thresh to some extent. Not in terms of all of her abilities, but in terms of how she gets used in team fights, in the sense that she can engage fairly well with her Q. It's fast, but it's shorter range as far as grabbing them. And you have a little bit of flexibility in how you want to, use her Q. You can pull them closer to you. You can push them away if you need to disengage with it. You can sling them into an ally for an extra stun. So you've got a little bit of flexibility there, which is cool. Then obviously you have her W, which is a crazy steroid. They probably need to nerf that. There's no reason that ability needs to give you that much movement speed, that much attack speed, and a revive, and last for 5 seconds. And I think it gets reactivated, or the time gets extended if you die on it while you're reanimated. So there's a lot going on with the W that I think is problematic. So that makes her really, really strong, though. And then you have the E, which is a pretty good shield. Like, individually, it's kind of like Sona. It's not that much, but if you hit multiple people with it, it can be pretty strong. And it's an okay poke ability. So she's not, like, that threatening, I don't think, at Platinum and lower in the laning phase. At higher levels where you have coordination and aggressive ADCs, her passive can be quite strong because she has a pretty long attack range for a support. It's like, I think it's 575. It's like Zyra range. So if you're just like weaving in those auto attacks with your ADC, like that does do a lot of chip damage, and that's part of what makes her really strong in like Pro and Challenger. But at the lower levels, her strength is really going to come from that ultimate, which is a massive amount of CC, huge hitbox for team fights, and then the W for the revive. Because so many people will forget about the W, and they'll just, use everything to try to kill one person in a team fight, and you just save them and get that reset, and they just don't have any more resources after they've used all their cooldowns. So anyways, I still think that's going to be her profile. She's still going to be strong. Yes, she is a little bit weaker all in early, but she still is going to have a ton of utility going forward. So I think she's going to be in a pretty good spot. I don't remember. I can go ahead and close out of these. I don't remember exactly what her... I didn't mean to close that one. What her win rate is, but I think it's probably at least still 51 or 52. She was at 53 last patch. It's a 51, so she has been tapped down a little bit, but I still think she's good. I still think she's S tier. And then you've got Seraphine, another one who was tapped on this patch, so her shield has a little bit of less of an AP ratio, and the healing per ally is also down a little bit. I don't think that's going to matter too much. Her win rate is down. It is down. I mean, this is one I'm not 100%. Maybe this was enough to push her out of S tier and put her into A. I could definitely see an argument for that. But at her core, she is really good in the laning phase. She provides a lot of pressure, a lot of wave clear on her Q. They haven't nerfed that. Double tapping her E is a great setup for a lot of your ADCs. I think more people have moved back towards Guardian. Although now that Guardian did get nerfed on this patch, it's possible more people are going to go for the Glacial. The Glacial build is nice because it just provides that extra little bit of slows. Because she doesn't have that much CC, right? Like, you've got your E, but after that, that's about it. So it does provide that extra bit of utility, and it does allow you to get the free boots, which are also going to be very handy on her because she doesn't need to roam that much early. She's really just more of a lane pressure champion. So getting the free boots just allows you to complete your item faster. Now, I think a lot of people are probably going to be moving away from Moonstone and moving towards Shirelia's. Yeah, and that's going to be the theme with a lot of enchanters. You'll still see people rocking the Moonstone, but I expect if we look at a lot of these enchanters, the win rate is going to be 2 or 3% higher on Shirelia's almost across the board. Just because that movement speed is really good. Now, could you go AP on her? Yeah, you can. I mean, you could try Night Harvester, I guess. It does have a high win rate, but the thing is, she needs mana, probably, like, if you're going to poke. I guess you could say outside the laning phase, she doesn't need to poke that much, maybe, but I just don't think it's going to be as good on her as it would be on Rakan, although I could be wrong about that. Some people have done Leandries and stuff on her. I think Leandries is kind of bad because you really kind of want burst damage with her if you want to go that route, if you want damage, right, to really leverage the fact that you can CC him for 3 seconds solid with like your ultimate plus a double tap E. You really just want him to die during that. Versus Leandries is like setting up for much longer fights, trying to bust tanks and things like that, and that's just not what she's great at. You could do Ludens, but again, that's kind of a low win rate. I would probably just do Shirelia's. You're kind of committed to team fights anyways by playing an enchanter. And you do have like your W to kind of last through a lot of team fights. So she's good. She's high pressure early on, really high impact, very long range ult, really good at chaining CC together with her E, with her R. She's a good champion. Now, like a lot of enchanters, though, she is going to be very vulnerable to all ends, especially later on when you're trying to either, rotate from one lane to another or trying to put down vision. If someone catches you out, right, if like a Talon jumps over a wall or something right in front of you, you're probably dead, right? Like you're not going to get out of that. Looks like some people are moving back towards Airy as well, which is kind of curious. It does help with your poke early, but that makes you extremely vulnerable to all ends. Remember that they didn't really nerf the Guardian like shield itself that much. They just nerfed the cooldown on it. So in like a team fight or an all-in situation, it's still going to be really good. It looks like a lot of people are kind of moving towards Airy. They do have basically the same win rate. You would get access to Mana Flow Band, which is good. If you do want to do Ardent Censer, Font of Life is way better at distributing that amongst your team. Especially if you have a bunch of range that are going to be spread out. But anyways, I think she's good. She's got multiple build paths. Not a ton has changed there. Okay, Senna, pretty much the same drill. She doesn't have a high win rate right now. It's like 50-51%. But she does apply a lot of pressure in the laning phase. If she's allowed to stack those souls and move up to late game, and particularly if you have tanks or just other people that can frontline and you're just going to have front to back 5v5 team fights, then I think she can be pretty good. She is vulnerable, like Seraphine, to getting caught out and blown up, out in the open, or if she gets engaged on, that can be a problem. But she does have really long range, and she does get a lot of movement speed. If you take Fleet Footwork, which a lot of people do, and she's going to go Swiftness Boots, and then you also have your Q to give you a little bit of extra movement speed as well. So she can kite a lot of bruiser melee champions that are just trying to run at her, right? If you just land that auto and then, land your W to root them and run out. Okay, hold on, my daughter just came in here. All right, you want to go in the little? Why don't you go in the clubhouse? Push your clubhouse back. Okay, there you go. Okay, we're good. Sorry, she wanted to come in and she likes to hang out with me at night, so I just build her up this little pillow fort over there. Not pillow, it's like blanket fort with chairs and things. Give her her clubhouse where she hangs out. But yeah, Senna's still good. Scales, applies pressure early, is vulnerable to all ends. Items are expensive, but the souls give you a lot of free value for later on as long as you can get the right protection. Especially if your team needs some extra AD. If you've got like 3 AP champs on your team, she can be pretty good. Okay, Janna, not a lot has changed. They did nerf her specifically on this patch. So they nerfed Moonstone, which is a really good item with the Glacial build. Just because of like how Glacial scales with plus healing and shielding and how it interacts with the Tornado. Basically, the slow gets to be stupid. It's like off of one item, 60 or 70% slow on the Glacial on top of all that healing that you do. Now, they did nerf her shield by 10, and the bonus healing and shielding, which does matter. But they did give her some extra healing on her ult. So, yeah, it seems like it should matter because they also nerfed Moonstone and they also nerfed Ardent Censer and, all these other items. But at the end of the day, she still has like a 53% win rate. It's still one of the highest champs. And a lot of that is because Janna's value isn't just in her stats, it's in her abilities, right? Like, Tornado with Glacial is so disruptive in fights. Like, your ultimate is extremely disruptive. Like, it makes it so difficult for anyone to dive through the Janna unless they have something that makes them immune to CC, right? Like a Hecarim ultimate or, something like that. And there are more and more of those types of abilities in the game now. But she's still going to be extremely good at dealing with most divers. Now, I personally, it's about the same as Shreya's now, Moonstone and Shreya. So it kind of depends on if you want to help your team engage more or if you want to sit back and try to heal more. I would say if you need to get Putrefier, then Shreya's is probably better because you're not going to benefit from that extra scaling with the plus healing and shielding unless you get Redemption. So, if you're gonna do Moonstone, I think that you want to be able to do Redemption. I don't know that you necessarily have to run it that way, but it feels really bad if you get Moonstone and your second item doesn't have any healing on it, so you can't really leverage one of those Moonstone passives as much as you should be able to. But yeah, really good at peeling. You know, my main thing with Janna is you're really, really hoping that your ADC is good. You know, and if your ADC is good, if they're on top of it, then she feels extremely oppressive. Like the enemy team sometimes just can't do anything to try to stop your ADC from taking over the game. But if your ADC is a turkey and you just don't have a lot of people to protect on your team, or if your team is just doesn't want to team fight very much, everyone's just kind of run around yellow queuing or just 1-3-1, you know, double split pushing or something. She's not going to be the greatest in those situations. So she does rotate a lot better than most champs because she's faster with her W, and she has a lot of self-peel. She has her Tornado and her R. So unlike Seraphine, Sona, some of these other champs that just have an activatable temporary movement speed buff with limited peels, she actually has a permanent movement speed buff and 2 different ways to peel really effectively if you have to. And the Glacial itself just makes it really difficult for people to get her, right? You just hit them with a Tornado and there's just almost no way they catch you with Glacial up. Unless they like use Flash and all kinds of other stuff, and then you just R and trade your, you know, 2.5 minute ult for their 5 minute Flash. But anyways, really good, just can't really control the game super well early on. At least that's my experience with it. It's just really hard to make plays with her. Okay, Taric. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize it was already so late. Alright, we'll move through this a little bit quicker so I can get over to the stream. Okay, Taric is... he has a really high win rate on this patch. I just haven't seen it personally. Like, I tried to play him a few games, and I just wasn't super impressed. Just because he's still... It just feels like you can kite him, and it's just really hard to make plays during the laning phase with him. But more people have moved over to trying out a Shirelia's build, and I think that's a really good idea, just to allow your team to run in and really leverage that ultimate when you give everybody invulnerability. And because of the fact that you can spam your Q like so often, then you're going to be able to give out that extra movement speed to people. So I think it's pretty good. If you can stick to people and if they have a lot of melee and you're just like auto attacking. But he doesn't roam super well. He doesn't have any movement speed upgrades. It's hard for him to all in and kill people in the laning phase. Like, yes, you can use your flash with your stun, but if you're just like running at him with your stun, it's hard to make that work sometimes, especially against double ranged, right? If you have Misfortune and Lux just like raining all their nonsense on you the whole time, that can be problematic. But I've got him here at the top of A tier because he does have a really high win rate. I mean, it's hard, you can't deny that. He's got a 54% win rate, and especially when he gets to 2 items, he's got a 65% win rate. So he is very hard to kill, he's very durable, and he can provide a lot of disruption in team fights as long as the enemy will commit to those team fights, right? As long as they will opt in to 5v5ing you and they're not just going to kite you or force you into a split push situation, then he can be very good. And as long as they give you a free pass in the laning phase, he can be good. Now, historically, I have not really liked Taric that much because enchanters just do what he wants to do better, right? Like, they just manage 5v5 team fights better. But he does leverage some of these items really well. So, like, the Glacial he can use well, and people have moved over to Glacial and moved away from the Aftershock or the Guardian builds, which looks like that's working out pretty well. So that does give him some more stickiness. The Shirelia's gives him some more stickiness. They did give him some buffs a few patches ago, I think on his E and his Q, so that was meaningful. They have nerfed a lot of the enchanters. They just nerfed Moonstone. They nerfed a lot of the other plus healing and shielding items. So his matchups are getting better and better, I think, against enchanters, just because of the way the items, the runes, and kind of the metagame is shaping up right now. So it is really good. I could definitely see an argument where you could put Taric in the S tier, But I'm just keeping him in A just because I've personally tried it and haven't had a ton of success on it, and I just haven't played against it a lot. Um, but I can respect its power. Okay, Ashe is another one that I have up here, and I really want to hate on Ashe support because I just think it's ridiculous. I'm like, she just doesn't do anything really late game, and you should be able to engage on her and kill her over and over again. But the reality is, with Comet, she does provide quite a bit of poke in the laning phase if you pair her together with a Jen or a Misfortune or something like that. And then that arrow is on such a low cooldown, it just really doesn't even matter that you don't do anything late game except for slow people with auto attacks and use your arrow. But that's enough, right? If you land that arrow on immobile champions, it's up every 30 seconds late game, then that's a kill, right? So she still has one of the best engage abilities in the game, and as long as you're hitting those arrows, she can be really impactful, even if it seems like 3 of her 4 abilities fall off a cliff. Late game, that one ability is strong enough to pull you through sometimes. And a lot of people have been getting Mandate on her so that when you're applying the slows with your auto attacks, then your enemies are getting that extra damage off of Mandate, and they're getting that extra movement speed. So that can be good. Hawkshot does help you out as well. It makes it a lot easier to ward without getting caught out late game. So she's okay. I've lost to it multiple times. Even when we've killed him a lot, we kill him 8 times in the laning phase or something, and she still has those arrows, and the ADC just keeps getting hit by arrows, and they didn't take cleanse, don't buy QSS, and that can just determine games. So I could see an argument for moving her down to B, but just, again, based on my anecdotal evidence, in platinum, gold type of solo queue, I think she can be good. Okay, Brand, still going to be pretty strong overall. There's less sustain in the laning phase, so his damage is going to stick. His ultimate bouncing around, if they have a lot of melees on their team, can be really strong. They did buff Mask and Demonic Embrace, the double Mask build, a few patches ago, so that now multiple champions on a team can have it and stack with each other, because before the effects just replaced each other, they didn't stack. But now you can. So Brand and Zyra, those almost always kind of go hand in hand, just depending on what you enjoy more, what you're more familiar with. Brand has lower cooldowns and can put out, potentially bigger burst early on, and he has a lot of consistency with his ult if they have a lot of melees, versus Zyra has really long cooldowns, but it's super consistent poke early on, although the all-in damage is going to be a little bit less until you get a couple items. But both of them are very strong and very similar. Zyra has way better bush control, though, with her plants, so she has better vision control. So historically, I've personally enjoyed playing Zyra more, but I think that from what I've seen, the Brands are scarier to play against than the Zyras are, in my experience. Just because Zyra, her cooldowns are so long, you have huge windows of vulnerability. If she misses her E, she's just dead most of the time against a lot of champs, because she just can't do anything for 12 seconds if she misses her E. Okay, Lux is another one that's super strong, and I would personally put Lux a little bit higher than Brand and Zyra, but I think for most people she might be a little bit lower, but she's in the same ballpark, and it's a similar deal. Good poke, good burst damage. The unique aspects of Lux are that her E is really long range, so it's excellent poke. It's very consistent once you get used to throwing it and kind of the timing and how long it takes to get there. And then really short cooldown on her ultimate, so you can use it very frequently, even to wave clear, push waves if you need to, like in a side lane. Something like that if your team's just not managing the waves that well. But a lot of it is just kind of the vision control late game. You're not going to get killed in bushes because you can check from so far away. And that's just a huge boon that most AP champs don't have access to. So I still think that she's going to be pretty strong. Sona, I thought would be a lot better on this patch, because other enchanters I thought would get worse, because she doesn't buy a lot of those items, at least with contemporary Sona builds. Usually she's going for Archangels and Shirelias. She can still go for Moonstone, although it's a lot weaker after the nerfs. But She's only got like a 50% win rate right now, so she definitely is feeling it a little bit. But she does provide a lot of very consistent poke as long as you don't get engaged all in. She can just spam her Q over and over again for the airy, and if you want to go Scorch procs early. They did buff Scorch a little bit. Obviously, Gathering Storm is better for late game, but if you just want the early pressure, then Scorch can be good. I would say maxing Q on her is probably the way to go after the nerfs on W. But yeah, she's still going to be like, I think, respectable enough to keep in A tier even with only a 50% win rate. Okay, others. Yuumi got directly nerfed, but seems like super OP in the right situation. If you get snowballed on, nothing much has changed there. Lulu, extremely good with certain champions. So with Twitch, with Kog'Maw, things that really benefit from attack speed. The problem there is Renata also does that now, and I think she just does it better than Lulu. Lulu does have better single target protection against assassins with her polymorph and whatever her ult is called. But Renata is going to have so much more teamfight pressure with her ultimate, with her shield hitting multiple targets, and Renata can potentially start fights with her Q. Lulu's Q is just worthless, basically, outside of like level 1, level 2. It provides a very small slow. Well, it's actually a pretty decent slow, but it just doesn't last very long. So I just think that Renata is just a better version of Lulu right now in a lot of situations. Again, unless it's like Kog'Maw or Twitch, specifically because of the extra auto attack damage that she gives with her passive when you put picks on them. They're doing like 80 extra auto attack damage, and that's something that Renata doesn't give out. So Lulu is a little bit better at single target buffing and debuffing, but Renata is just going to be better at team fights, and it's just a more well-rounded champion, I think. Okay, Nautilus, still one of the premier engaged champs. After the durability buff, it does feel kind of bad, but a lot of these champs are getting their HP nerfed again, right? So like Renata got hit on the HP front. I don't know if any of these other ones did, but they are nerfing like the healing and shielding on Janna, on Senna, on Seraphine over the last few patches. So it is, creating a space for Nautilus to be a little bit better. He does like Aftershock, so he wasn't really affected by many of the rune changes. A little bit, with conditioning, maybe font. But he's still going to be really good. He's got a huge hitbox on the Q. His ultimate provides a whole lot of value. It's, very difficult to outplay that ultimate. So I still think Nautilus can be good. Now, Soraka is okay. She probably got hit the hardest by a lot of the changes. I wouldn't be surprised if she is under 50% right now, just because that's all she is, yes, she does have a silence. She's actually doing better than I thought. She's at 52, so she's holding up. But it has made her life a little bit harder. And then I think that's going to be it. I don't want to go too long. Like I said, we're already a little bit over the time that I wanted. Leona can snowball, but Nautilus is just going to be better at it. Karma can pressure, but I would probably either just commit to one of these AP champs if that's what you want, or just commit to like a shielding champ. So I think that Seraphine's just going to be a better Karma in a lot of situations, just has a much higher team fight impact ult. Debatable, I guess, depending on how much use you make out of an empowered E on Karma. I feel like Seraphine, it's just going to be better by default in a lot of situations, and that when Karma is better, that's the exception rather than the rule. And they both poke extremely well in the early game, so I'd rather just do Seraphine than Karma a lot of the time. Pyke can be very good at killing some of these squishies, but he does need to snowball early on. Thresh, you can make him work if you're just a God Thresh player and you hit everything all the time, but he really, really hates poke, and there are a lot of poke champions out there. Like, you just hard lose the lane. If you're against, like, Misfortune plus Brand, Zyra, Lux, whatever, or Jen plus one of those champions, it's just really hard to do anything. Talia is someone I haven't explored, but I think that she could have potential as support. I've seen her do extremely well in the jungle and mid lane. And it's just, she stops that mobility with those boulders so well, and she still does a lot of burst damage, and she has some pseudo engage or disengage with her little flip, or not flip, whatever, the little rock that knocks you forward or backward depending on how you flick your mouse. So I don't know. I haven't seen her use this support, but I could see it being extremely obnoxious, at least situationally, against a lot of these high mobility supports. Don't play that into me when I play Rakan, please. If we get matched together. But yeah, I think it has potential. And then the rest of these, it's just kind of the same old story with most of them. I did put some of them down a little bit lower. It seems like the AP champs should be good, but realistically, I'd rather be playing these AP champs than these AP champs because I feel like they're just going to have higher base damage and they're going to be able to snowball, even though they're a little bit shorter range, the Bran and the Zyra. I just think they're going to be more effective. But anyways, okay, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you next time. Have a good day.